It's been a long time you haven't hung out with your friends. No fun plans with each other, nothing, all alone at home. So you're at home, on your bed, watching Friends, and you think, I wish I had close friends like this. I wish I had this intimate bond with some people. Well, this is called interpersonal isolation. It's the kind of isolation you have when you're not connected with other people enough. There's a second kind of isolation. A few years ago, I was in a depressive mood, and I remember I wrote somewhere, I feel like I don't know myself as I did before. I want to connect with myself, and I want to know what it is that I'm wanting and what it is that I'm needing. But the problem is I cannot interact with myself. I think most of us have had that feeling in some part in our lives, and this is called the intrapersonal isolation. It's the kind of isolation that you have with some parts of yourself. You feel like you don't know yourself completely, you're not connecting and communicating with yourself completely. It's like you're denying some part of yourself, and that's the second kind of isolation. And there's a third kind. It's a separation between you and the whole world. It's like there's an unbridgeable gulf between you and every other being. There's a gap between you and everything else, and that gap cannot be filled with anything. But this kind of isolation, most of the time, is buried under the layers of busy routines in our day-to-day life. So we're not conscious about that kind of isolation. But imagine one night you're driving in a kind of empty road, and there's this fog which makes it impossible for you to see the environment and even to see the road. There's this anxiety inside you because it's like you're in this car and everything around this car has been disappeared. Most days when we are living based on our routines, we don't have that kind of feeling. But there are times like when you're driving in an empty road where there's a dense fog, you're kind of reminded that the ground underneath your feet is not solid every second, and you have lost that cozy feeling of belongingness. You don't feel at home, and maybe there is no solid ground. This third type of isolation is existential isolation, and it is discussed in the Existential Psychotherapy book that I have talked about in 2 videos. The first 2 parts of the book were about death and freedom, and now the third part is about existential isolation that I'm gonna talk about in this video. The next video will be about meaninglessness, the 4th part of the book. So this third type of isolation, which is the existential isolation, is the separation between you and the whole world. So 2 years ago, I got so sick that I had to stay at a hospital for a few days. And those days I had the support of my family and my loved ones and friends. But at night, especially at night, there were times that I could definitely feel a gap between me and other people, between me and my mother, between me and my loved ones. And although they were trying very hard to be as supportive as they can, they couldn't reduce that anxiety that I had, and they couldn't reduce the feeling of loneliness that I had at that position. Because, you know, at night where I was about to go to sleep, I remember that I would think about the fact that whatever happens, it's just me. I'm waiting for the medical test results, and whatever the results, it's just me. No one can save me, or I don't know how to explain that, but it's like no one can really be so much connected to me to understand exactly what is happening to me and what I'm experiencing in this universe. Just me on this planet having this specific experience. That's it. And I think that was existential isolation. I was feeling the gap between me and the rest of the world. And that gap has always existed, but because I was distracted, I wasn't paying attention to that isolation. So now the question is, if we are isolated, if there's a gap between us and others? What does a healthy relationship look like? Here, Dr. Yalom believes that although we are isolated in this universe, we can be together in our isolation. We can share that feeling of isolation to dampen the pain. And that's one of the superpowers that us human beings have and we can give to each other. It doesn't mean that we have to attach ourselves to somebody or become a part of someone else to run away from the pain of existential isolation. It's not healthy, because if we use people like this, it's not love, it's just need. And that using the other person to numb the pain of isolation blocks our way to reach love. But if we consider other people as frightened as ourselves, as alone and as anxious as ourselves in this universe, and think of them as human beings who long for the feeling of at-homeness like ourselves, that's when we can reach love. And that's the healthy way to have a relationship with other people. Abraham Maslow believes that an individual's basic motivation is oriented toward either deficit or growth. If their needs of fulfillment, safety, belongingness, identification, love and respect, and prestige are met, they are the growth-motivated people, and they are more self-sufficient. They realize their own inner potential for maturity, and they are more self-sufficient. The growth-motivated people are less needful for others' praise and affection, and they are less anxious for prestige and honor, and less beholden to others. On the other hand, the deficient-motivated people are more dependent on others, as I said before, and also they think of other people in terms of their usefulness. I mean, when they meet someone for the first time, they think about the use of that person and how this person can meet their specific need. But I think this part of the book would be better to be taken with a pinch of salt. I mean, I don't think it's okay to categorize people rigidly, and think of them as black or white, completely black or completely white. Generalizing too much can kind of distort your thoughts, and it's not a critical thinking approach. I myself took it with a pinch of salt, and I think that people are on the spectrum of being growth motivated or deficient motivated. But the thing is, if you want to have healthy relationships with other people, the smart thing to do is to not look at other people as some objects to use to meet your needs, but as some people that you can give love to, which takes us to the next part. We're gonna call the love that growth motivated people have the B love, which is the love that they have for the being of the other person, and the love that deficient motivated people have for other people, let's call it the D love, which is the deficiency love. D love is selfish love and a love need concept, but B lovers are more independent and less jealous, and they are, there's this paradox. They are more disinterested because they are independent, but at the same time they are more eager to help and support the other person and help that other person to reach self-actualization. They are more proud of other people's success, they are more generous, more altruistic, and these kind of characteristics makes them have more self-acceptance and a feeling of love worthiness, and it enhances continued growth. There's a book called The Art of Loving by Dr. Erich Fromm. Dr. Fromm believes that love is an answer to the problem of existence. And immature love says, I love because I am loved. But mature love is, I am loved because I love. And Dr. Yalom believes that most of the time when people complain about not being loved, the root problem is not being loved. The problem is not loving. Because you see that other person as an object to use for your needs, and you're not loving them for who they actually are, that results in the other person not loving you. And what do you think is the most fundamental type of love? Erich Fromm believes that it's the brotherly love. It's an experience of union with all individuals, which is characterized by its very lack of exclusivity. It's the love you have for everything and everyone, and you are as less exclusive as possible. And I think it's very hard. I've read this book twice, and each time I reached this part, I was like, it's not completely possible, I think. I think as we get older and as we gain much more experience, we have more empathy for other people because we are more understanding about the reason people do wrong things and things that we are not okay with. And because we are more understanding and we have more empathy, we can be more forgiving, so we can give more love to others. Yeah, I think it's very hard, but it's possible, I hope. Let's think about short-term relationships. We may think that because they are short-term, they are not deep enough and they are not rich enough. So why bother? One of Dr. Yalom's patients was thinking like that. And that's how Dr. Yalom describes her feelings. She was always the outsider, walking down the cold, dark street, observing the warm lights and cozy gathering in other people's homes. So Dr. Yalom tries to persuade her to have short conversations, something like small talk with other people in the group therapy session, but she's not into that. But Dr. Yalom keeps on persuading her to have conversation with others without judging them and try to just experience the world of others. And he wants her to just open up without asking why, to just see what happens. After 1 hour of conversation with others in the group session, she says that that experience enriched her life. She feels more alive, and now she feels that she is in the world instead of being an outsider who just looks at other people having their lives, having those conversations in their warm homes while she's walking down the cold and dark street all alone. Well, that part of the book reminded me of one of my own experiences. It was in the pandemic, and because of the pandemic, I was not interacting with my friends as much as I used to, and I was kind of feeling lonely. And I remember one night I was so alone that I was jealous of every person on this planet that has someone to talk to really deeply and be close to. Thankfully, I called one of my friends and I felt better, but I still remember that hurtful and sharp feeling of loneliness that I had. And I think calling your loved ones is a good approach, but not all the time. First, you got to learn to be alone with yourself and to be okay with being alone. And actually, that's one of the therapeutic approaches that Dr. Yalom refers to in terms of dealing with existential isolation. He actually recommends one of his patients to stay in a motel for a day and write about the feelings that they have without any distractions, no TV, no phone, and not even reading a book. Even reading a book is considered distraction in that situation. You got to be alone with your thoughts and you got to journal your thoughts and feelings. So that patient writes that, well, I'm alone in this room and it's okay and I'm not going crazy. So it's okay to be alone sometimes. And that's the first step that we can take to deal with our feeling of existential isolation. And then we can connect to other people so that we can be alone together. Another thing that Dr. Yalom recommends is meditation. Meditation also helps us deal with our feelings and emotions and thoughts and, you know, kind of interact with ourselves. When we are having more self-acceptance, that's when we can have deeper and more meaningful relationships with other people. So that was a summary of the third part of the book. I cannot recommend this book enough. I think you enjoyed this book and I hope you read the book completely. And thank you for watching, and bye.